Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. Manhattan. Pinnacle Tower Corporate Building. Coffee spilled across the marble table when Sophia Bennett slammed her fist down so hard that even the ornamental plants trembled. 50 pairs of eyes turned toward her in the lobby of Wall Street's most exclusive skyscraper. Incompetent. The word echoed through the glass and steel environment like a gunshot. You are absolutely, completely, categorically incompetent. The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Sophia breathed heavily, her face red with anger, pointing her finger at the most feared man in American corporate circles. Ethan Carter, 32 years old, worth $8 billion, known for making Fortune 500 CEOs tremble with just a look. He remained motionless. His steel blue eyes, normally cold as a Chicago winter, now gleamed with something no one could identify: surprise, amusement, or murderous fury. "Sorry, could you repeat that?" His voice came out dangerously low, with that Upper East Side accent that usually made assistants faint. Sophia swallowed hard, but the venom of adrenaline still coursed through her veins. "You heard me perfectly. Incompetent. Incompetent. Do I need to spell it out? Or did your Harvard education not cover that?" A collective murmur swept through the lobby. Someone whispered, "She's dead." Another muttered something about, "Nice knowing her." The receptionist looked ready to faint. Ethan took a step forward, closing the distance between them to less than 3 feet. Sophia was tall, 5'9", but he still towered over her easily at 6'3". His cologne, something expensive that probably cost more than her salary, invaded her senses. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to, Miss Bennett?" "Sophia Bennett. And yes, I do. I'm talking to the man who just destroyed 6 months of my work because he couldn't be bothered to review contracts before signing them." She crossed her arms, keeping her chin raised. "The man who fired 50 families 1 week before Christmas because resource optimization looks good in annual reports." "Ah." He tilted his head, studying her like a predator studies its prey. "You work for Lawson and Associates." "Worked. Past tense. Thanks to your very peculiar definition of due diligence." Ethan smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the kind of smile that made competitors liquidate positions and flee to the Hamptons. "Interesting." He pulled his iPhone from his Italian suit pocket, a casual movement that made half the people in the lobby instinctively step back. "Nathan?" "Yeah, it's me. I need intel on a Sophia Bennett, ex-Lawson and Associates." "What? Ah, I see. Yes. That explains everything." Sophia felt her stomach drop. Darn. Ethan pocketed the phone and turned his full attention back to her, those piercing eyes drilling into her soul. "So, you're the famous Sophia Bennett, the creative director who came up with the Pulse of America campaign that saved Lawson from bankruptcy last year. Very talented, from what I hear." He paused dramatically. "And now unemployed." "That's beside the point. Actually, it's very much the point." Ethan checked the gold Patek Philippe on his wrist. "Because you just gave me a brilliant idea." Sophia didn't like his tone one bit. "As you so eloquently put it, I'm incompetent. Clearly, I need help understanding the nuances of corporate communication." He smiled again, this time showing all his perfect teeth. "Congratulations, Miss Bennett. You just landed yourself a job." "What job?" "You're going to teach me not to be incompetent. Considering you're an expert on the subject identifying incompetence, I mean, you seem like the perfect person for the job." The entire lobby held its breath. "I don't want to work for you." "Ah. But you will want to." Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Because if you don't accept, I'll make sure that no advertising agency, communications firm, or consultancy in New York, Los Angeles, or anywhere in the United States will hire you again. Your career will be over before you even leave this building." Sophia felt her blood run cold. He was serious. Of course he was. Men like Ethan Carter didn't make empty threats. "And if I accept?" "If you accept, you'll earn triple what you made at Lawson. You'll have access to the best projects in the country. And who knows?" He paused, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "Maybe you'll actually teach me something." Sophia looked around. 50 people were still watching them like it was a live episode of Succession. There was no way out. It was accept or watch her career go down the drain. "How long?" 3 months. "If after 3 months you can't transform me into the least incompetent executive in America, I'll consider that proof that you're just as incompetent as I am." She extended her hand, praying it wasn't shaking. "Deal." Ethan shook her hand, holding it for a second longer than necessary. Welcome to your worst nightmare, Sophia Bennett. When she left the building 10 minutes later with a signed contract and the feeling that she had just made a deal with the devil, she didn't see Ethan still standing in the lobby, watching her through the glass with an expression no one could decipher. Nathan, his assistant for 10 years, approached cautiously. Sir, may I ask what the heck just happened here? Ethan continued watching the street where Sophia disappeared into the New York crowd. I just met the first person in years who isn't afraid of me, Nathan, and that's good. I have absolutely no idea. Ethan finally turned around, that dangerous smile still playing on his lips. But it's going to be interesting to find out. Sophia's apartment in Brooklyn looked like a hurricane had hit it. If hurricanes were made of fabric swatches, campaign mock-ups, and empty wine bottles. She sat cross-legged on her bed, staring at the contract Ethan's lawyers had delivered within 2 hours of their lobby encounter. 3 months, she muttered, flipping through pages of legal jargon that basically boiled down to, your soul belongs to us now. 3 months to make Satan himself less incompetent. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister, Olivia. Saw on LinkedIn, you left Lawson. Everything okay, Soph? Sophia groaned. The corporate gossip mill worked faster than Manhattan traffic during rush hour, which was saying something since traffic here moved at the speed of continental drift. Long story. Call you later. Might be moving to my personal nightmare temporarily. Are you joining a reality television show? Despite everything, Sophia laughed. Trust Olivia to make entertainment industry jokes at a time like this. Another buzz. Unknown number. Tomorrow, 7 o'clock. A.M. Sharp. Don't be late. EC. 7 o'clock. M. Sophia shrieked at her phone. Who even functions at 7 a.m.? Vampires and investment bankers. That's who. She flopped back on her bed, staring at the water stains on her ceiling that looked suspiciously like the state of Texas. Her landlord, Mr. Nowak, had been getting around to fixing that for 8 months now. The contract was thorough. She'd give Ethan's legal team that salary. $180,000 for 3 months. That was more than she'd made in 2 years at Lawson. The catch? She had to be available 247, attend all his meetings, and somehow transform the most ruthless businessman in America into someone with actual human emotions. Piece of cake, she said to her ceiling, Texas. I'll just sprinkle some fairy dust and turn Gordon Gekko into Mr. Rogers. Her phone rang. Olivia. Okay. Spill. What happened? And don't you dare say nothing because your LinkedIn update says you're taking a new direction in corporate consulting, which is Sophia speak for, I did something catastrophically stupid, Sophia sighed. Olivia knew her too well. Being twins had its disadvantages. I may have called Ethan Carter incompetent in public, very public, like 50 people in the Pinnacle Tower lobby public. Silence. Then, Sophia Rose Bennett. Please tell me you're joking. I wish I were. But in my defense, he deserved it. He destroyed the campaign I'd been working on for Lawson. 50 people lost their jobs because Mr. Billionaire couldn't be bothered to read the fine print. And now? Now I'm his personal, I don't even know what to call it. Competency coach? Corporate behavior consultant? Professional miracle worker? Olivia paused, and Sophia could practically hear her twin, Googling on the other end. Oh my gosh. Soph, he's gorgeous. Like stupidly gorgeous. And rich. And apparently single. According to Forbes, he's also colder than a penguin's backside, and has the emotional range of a calculator, but gorgeous. Olivia. Focus. I'm not here to swoon over him. I'm just saying, maybe this won't be so bad. 3 months. With a gorgeous billionaire. Worse things have happened. He threatened to destroy my career if I didn't accept. Okay, that's less romantic, but still, gorgeous billionaire. Sophia was about to respond when her apartment buzzer rang. She lived on the 4th floor of a pre-war building with an elevator that worked when it felt like it. Nobody just dropped by at 9 o'clock p.m. Hold on, Liv. Someone's buzzing. She pressed the intercom button. Hello? Miss Bennett. Delivery from Carter Industries. Sophia's stomach dropped. It's 9 o'clock at night. Yes, ma'am. Mr. Carter wanted to ensure you received this tonight. Of course he did. The man probably never slept. He probably had his dreams scheduled and color-coded in his calendar. Come on up. 4th floor. 5 minutes later, Sophia was staring at a delivery man holding a garment bag, a shoebox, and what looked like a small jewelry case. I didn't order anything, she said. Compliments of Mr. Carter, ma'am, for tomorrow's meetings. After he left, Sophia spread everything on her bed. The garment bag contained a designer suit, charcoal gray, impeccably tailored, with a label she'd only seen in magazines. The shoebox held Italian leather heels that probably cost more than her rent. The jewelry case contained a simple but elegant watch and pearl earrings. Her phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. Dress code for Carter Industries is business formal. Thought you might need an upgrade from your current wardrobe. EC. Sophia looked down at her paint-stained NYU sweatshirt and yoga pants. The audacity of this man. She picked up her phone and typed back, "I have professional clothes. Thanks." Response came immediately. "I saw what you were wearing today. Trust me." "You don't." Sophia gasped. The nerve. She'd been wearing her best blazer. Okay, her only blazer that didn't have coffee stains. But still, that blazer was from Banana Republic. Exactly my point. "See you at 7 o'clock a.m. Conference room A. Don't be late." Sophia stared at the phone, then at the expensive clothes laid out on her bed. Part of her wanted to march back to Pinnacle Tower right now and throw everything at his perfectly groomed head. But the rational part, the part that remembered her empty bank account and the stack of overdue bills on her kitchen counter, whispered that maybe, just maybe, she should swallow her pride. She tried on the suit. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. Ethan Carter probably had people whose job was knowing everyone's measurements just by looking at them. The watch was beautiful, simple, elegant, expensive, without being flashy. The kind of watch that said, "I belong in boardrooms," rather than, "I'm trying too hard." Her reflection in the mirror looked like a different person. Professional, confident, like someone who could actually go toe-to-toe with a billionaire and win. "Okay, universe," she said to her reflection. 3 months? I can survive 3 months with anyone, even if that anyone is an arrogant, condescending, impossibly handsome. She stopped herself. Where had that come from? Her phone buzzed one more time. "Olivia. Soph, you still there? You went quiet, and that makes me nervous." Sophia looked at herself in the mirror again, then at the contract on her bed, then at the view of Manhattan's skyline through her tiny window. "I'm here. And Liv, I think I'm about to do something either incredibly stupid or incredibly brilliant. Knowing you, probably both. Good luck, sis. Try not to fall for the billionaire." Sophia laughed, but as she hung up and prepared for bed, Olivia's words echoed in her mind. Fall for the billionaire? That was ridiculous. She'd rather fall for a hungry shark. Although, she had to admit as she drifted off to sleep, both were probably equally dangerous. The last thing she remembered thinking was that tomorrow, her real challenge would begin. And Ethan Carter had no idea what he'd gotten himself into. Neither did she. But that was a problem for future Sophia. Present Sophia was just trying to survive until morning without having a panic attack. Outside her window, Manhattan glittered like a million promises and threats, and somewhere in that maze of lights, Ethan Carter was probably still awake, planning her first day in what he'd called her worst nightmare. Sophia smiled grimly in the darkness. If he thought he was her nightmare, he was about to discover that she could be one, too. Sophia arrived at Pinnacle Tower at 6:55 a.m., clutching a venti coffee, like her life depended on it. The morning doorman, a different one from yesterday's disaster, looked her up and down with obvious approval. "You must be Miss Bennett. Mr. Carter is expecting you, 42nd floor, conference room A." The elevator ride felt like ascending to Mount Olympus, if Mount Olympus had been designed by someone with a serious marble obsession and too much money. Sophia checked her reflection in the polished steel doors. The designer suit made her look like she belonged here, even if she felt like an imposter. Conference room A was a glass-walled shrine to corporate intimidation. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Manhattan, while a mahogany table that could probably seat the entire UN dominated the center. At the head of that table sat Ethan Carter, looking annoyingly perfect in a navy suit that probably cost more than her car. He didn't look up when she entered. "You're 3 minutes early," he said, still focused on his laptop. "I'm impressed. I'm always punctual," Sophia replied, setting her coffee down and taking the seat across from him. Unlike some people who think contracts are optional reading, that got his attention. Those steel blue eyes snapped up to meet hers, and Sophia felt a little thrill of satisfaction. Score one for her. "Shall we begin your education, Miss Bennett? I thought I was here to educate you." "Oh, you are. But first, you need to understand what you're working with." Ethan closed his laptop with a decisive click. "Nathan." The door opened immediately, and a man in his 52nd entered. Tall, impeccably dressed, with the kind of efficient energy that screamed executive assistant extraordinaire. "Nathan Liu, meet Sophia Bennett." "Sophia, Nathan has been keeping me functional for the past decade. If you need anything, and I mean anything, he's your go-to." Nathan smiled warmly, a stark contrast to his boss's Arctic demeanor. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Bennett. I've heard quite a lot about yesterday's encounter." "All bad, I'm sure," Sophia said. "On the contrary, it's been years since anyone made Mr. Carter smile like that." "I was not smiling," Ethan said sharply. "Of course not, sir. Me mistake." Nathan's expression remained perfectly neutral, but Sophia caught the slight twinkle in his eyes. She liked him already. "Nathan, please bring Miss Bennett up to speed on today's schedule." Nathan produced a tablet with the efficiency of a magician pulling rabbits from hats. 9:00 a.m. Board meeting with Sterling Industries regarding the acquisition. 10:30. Conference call with the Tokyo office. Noon. Lunch with Senator Thompson about the infrastructure bill. 2 p.m. Quarterly review with department heads. 4 p.m. Press conference about the Lawson acquisition. Sophia's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. "Lawson acquisition?" Ethan's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Surprise. I bought your former employer this morning. Seemed like a good investment." "You what?" "When?" "How?" "Hostile takeover. Very hostile. Started the paperwork at midnight. Closed the deal at 5:00 a.m. He leaned back in his chair, looking insufferably pleased with himself. They never saw it coming. Sophia stared at him, pieces clicking into place. "You bought Lawson just to make a point to me." "I bought Lawson because it was undervalued and poorly managed. The fact that it makes a point to you is merely a delicious bonus." "You're insane. I'm thorough. There's a difference." Ethan stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. "Now, are you ready for your first lesson in how I do business?" The boardroom for the Sterling meeting was even more intimidating than Conference Room A. 20 executives in identical dark suits sat around a table that could have doubled as an aircraft carrier. Sophia took a seat in the corner, notebook ready, trying to look like she belonged. Ethan commanded the room without even trying. His presence was magnetic, not warm, exactly, but impossible to ignore. When he spoke, everyone listened. When he smiled, everyone tensed. "Gentlemen, ladies," he began, his voice carrying easily across the vast space. "Let's discuss why Sterling Industries needs Carter Industries more than they're willing to admit." What followed was a masterclass in corporate negotiation that was equal parts brilliant and terrifying. Ethan dissected Sterling's quarterly reports like a surgeon, exposing weaknesses with surgical precision. He anticipated every objection, countered every argument, and somehow made it look effortless. Sophia found herself taking notes not on what he was doing wrong, but on what he was doing right. His grasp of market dynamics was encyclopedic. His strategic thinking was 3 steps ahead of everyone else. His ability to read people and exploit their insecurities was, well, it was horrible and impressive in equal measure. The problem wasn't his competence. The problem was his complete lack of empathy. When Sterling's CFO mentioned potential layoffs, Ethan's response was clinical. "Redundancies are inevitable in any merger. The question is whether you want to control the process or have it control you." When someone raised concerns about company culture, Ethan waved it off. Culture is a luxury companies indulge in when they're not worried about survival. Sterling isn't in that position. He was right. But the way he said it made Sophia's skin crawl. These weren't numbers on a spreadsheet. They were people's lives. 2 hours later, Sterling Industries had been acquired for 40% less than their asking price, and everyone in the room looked like they'd been through a blender. "Excellent meeting," Ethan said as the Sterling executives filed out, looking shell-shocked. "Nathan, please send the usual congratulations basket to their office, the expensive one." "Of course, sir." When the room cleared, Ethan turned to Sophia with raised eyebrows. "Well, your assessment." Sophia looked down at her notes, then back at him. "You're not incompetent. Thank you for that ringing endorsement. You're brilliant. Actually, terrifyingly so." She stood up, facing him across the now empty boardroom. "But you're also completely heartless." "Heartless?" For the first time since she'd met him, Ethan looked genuinely surprised. "That's a strong word. You just bought a company, and you're already planning to fire people. But you discuss it like you're ordering lunch. These are human beings, Ethan. They have families, mortgages, kids in college, and if I don't make the hard decisions now, even more people will lose their jobs when the company fails completely." His voice was still calm, but Sophia caught a flicker of something annoyance, maybe hurt in his eyes. Sometimes being the villain means being the person who actually solves the problem. There has to be a middle ground between heartless efficiency and business failure, does there? Ethan moved closer, and Sophia was suddenly aware of how tall he was, how the expensive fabric of his suit stretched across broad shoulders. Show me what? Show me this mythical middle ground. You have 3 months to prove that successful business can be conducted with, what did you call it? Heart? He was close enough now that she could smell his cologne, see the tiny scar above his left eyebrow. Consider this your first assignment. Sophia lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly. Fine, but I'm going to need access to everything. Financial reports, personnel files, strategic planning documents, everything. Done. And I want to sit in on all your meetings, already planned. And if I think you're making a decision that's unnecessarily cruel, I get to speak up. Ethan's smile was slow and dangerous. This should be interesting. As they left the boardroom, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just agreed to something much more complicated than business consulting the way Ethan had looked at her when she'd called him heartless, like she'd hit a nerve he'd forgotten he had. Nathan fell into step beside them as they headed toward the elevator. If I may say so, Miss Bennett, that was quite impressive. Most people don't challenge Mr. Carter so directly. Most people probably value their jobs more than their principles, Sophia replied. On the contrary, Nathan said quietly, glancing at Ethan, who was checking his phone and presumably not listening. Most people just assume he doesn't have any principles to appeal to. The elevator doors opened, and as they stepped inside, Sophia caught Ethan watching her in the reflection of the polished steel doors. For just a moment, his usual mask of cool control slipped, and she saw something else underneath curiosity, maybe, or challenge. This was going to be a very long 3 months, but as the elevator descended toward their next meeting, Sophia realized she was looking forward to it more than she'd expected. Ethan Carter might be the most arrogant, infuriating man she'd ever met. He was also the most intriguing puzzle she'd ever encountered, and Sophia had always been good at puzzles. By the end of her first week at Carter Industries, Sophia had witnessed 3 corporate acquisitions, 2 department restructurings, and 1 executive assistant having what appeared to be a nervous breakdown in the supply closet. She'd also developed a grudging respect for Ethan's business acumen and a healthy fear of his ability to destroy lives with a single email. What she hadn't expected was to find him in his office at 11 p.m. on a Friday, still working. Sophia had returned to retrieve her laptop charger. The one luxury Ethan's wardrobe makeover hadn't included was a new bag, and her ancient messenger bag had a broken zipper that occasionally ate important things. The executive floor was dark, except for the glow spilling from Ethan's corner office. She knocked on the open door. Don't you have a penthouse apartment to go home to? Or a yacht? Maybe a private island somewhere? Ethan looked up from his computer, and Sophia was startled to see exhaustion etched in the lines around his eyes. His tie was loosened, his shirt sleeves rolled up, and his usually perfect hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his fingers through it. I have a penthouse, he said, but it's just as empty at 11 p.m. as it is at 7 o'clock p.m. The unexpected honesty in his voice caught Sophia off guard. This wasn't the coldly confident businessman she'd been sparring with all week. This was someone who looked lonely. When's the last time you took a real break? She asked, stepping into the office. And don't say lunch with Senator Thompson, because that was work disguised as food. I don't take breaks. Breaks are for people who can afford to stop moving. He gestured to the papers scattered across his desk. The Tokyo market's open in 6 hours. London's already trading. The world doesn't stop spinning just because it's Friday night in Manhattan. Sophia moved closer, studying the documents. Financial projections, market analyses, strategic planning reports. All for companies she recognized from this week's meetings. You're doing all this yourself. I have teams for implementation, but the decisions, he shrugged. Those are mine to make. That's insane. You can't personally oversee every detail of a multi-billion-dollar empire. Watch me. Sophia shook her head, sinking into the chair across from his desk. You know what your problem is? I'm sure you're about to tell me. You don't trust anyone. You micromanage everything because you assume everyone else will screw it up. She leaned forward, studying his face. What happened to you? Nobody becomes this controlling without a reason. Someone must have really let you down to make you think you have to do everything yourself. For a moment, something flickered across Ethan's features. Vulnerability, maybe, or old pain. Then the mask slammed back into place. Spare me the amateur psychology, Miss Bennett. I'm successful because I don't leave important things to chance. You're successful because you're brilliant, and you work harder than anyone else. But you're also miserable, alone, and probably about 30 minutes away from a stress-induced heart attack. I'm fine. Really? When's the last time you laughed? and I mean really laughed, not that terrifying smile you use to intimidate people. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, staring at something over her shoulder. I don't remember. The admission hung in the air between them, raw and unguarded. Sophia felt something shift in her chest, not pity, exactly, but understanding. She recognized the look in his eyes because she'd seen it in her own mirror during the worst days at Lawson, when the pressure felt crushing and success seemed impossible. "Come on," she said, standing up. "Where?" "Away from here. You need to remember what it feels like to be human instead of a profit-generating robot. I have work to finish. The work will still be here tomorrow." The world managed to spin for billions of years before Ethan Carter started trying to personally supervise its rotation. She held out her hand. "Trust me." He stared at her outstretched hand, like it might bite him. "I don't trust anyone. I know. That's why this is going to be terrifying and probably good for you." After a moment that stretched like eternity, Ethan reached out and took her hand. His palm was warm, slightly rough, and sent an unexpected jolt of electricity up Sophia's arm. She told herself it was just static from the office carpeting. "Where exactly are we going?" he asked as she led him toward the elevator. "You'll see." 20 minutes later, they were standing outside a tiny late-night diner in Queens that looked like it had been decorated by someone with a serious obsession with vintage Americana and chrome fixtures. The neon sign buzzed and flickered, advertising Sal's. "Open 247, best coffee in NYC." Ethan stared at the establishment, like she'd brought him to Mars. "This is your idea of—" "What, exactly?" "Food, real food. Not those fancy business lunches where everyone's too busy posturing to actually eat." Sophia pushed open the door, setting off a cheerful bell. "Plus, I'm starving, and I refuse to eat alone while you slowly kill yourself with overwork." The interior was exactly as advertised. Red vinyl booths, a checkerboard floor, and a jukebox that was probably older than both of them. A handful of customers occupied scattered tables, a taxi driver nursing coffee, 2 nurses still in scrubs sharing a piece of pie, an elderly man reading a newspaper. Sophia. A woman in her 62nd with steel-gray hair and a smile that could power a small city emerged from behind the counter. "Honey, what are you doing here so late? And who's this handsome stranger?" "Hey, Rose. This is Ethan." "Ethan, meet Rose. She makes the best apple pie in the 5 boroughs." Rose looked Ethan up and down, taking in the expensive suit and watch with shrewd eyes. "Wall Street. Something like that," Ethan said carefully. "Well, any friend of Sophia's gets the good booth." Rose led them to a corner table with a perfect view of the street. "Coffee's fresh, and I just pulled a meatloaf out of the oven." As Rose bustled away, Ethan looked around the diner with genuine bewilderment. "How do you know her?" "I used to come here when I was working late at Lawson. Sometimes, when the pressure got really bad, I'd take the subway out here just to remember that there was a world outside of advertising agencies and quarterly reports." Sophia slid into the booth across from him. Rose always had coffee ready and never asked questions about why I looked like I'd been crying. "You cried?" "Everyone cries sometimes, Ethan. It's part of being human." She studied his face. "When did you last cry?" "I don't cry. Ever." Sophia leaned back, processing this information. "That's not normal. You know, emotionally healthy people cry. It's how we process stress and grief and overwhelming feelings. I process stress by solving problems. Grief is inefficient, and overwhelming feelings are a luxury I can't afford." Rose returned with coffee and menus, giving them a moment to absorb the awkwardness of Ethan's declaration. Sophia wrapped her hands around her mug, using the warmth to center herself. "Okay, new rule," she said finally. "While we're here, you're not allowed to talk about business efficiency or profit margins. This is officially a business-free zone." "Then, what are we supposed to talk about?" "Normal things. Hobbies, family, movies you've seen recently." She paused. "You do have hobbies, right?" Ethan was quiet for so long that Sophia wondered if he'd heard the question. "I used to play piano," he said finally. "When I was younger, before." He trailed off, staring into his coffee. "Before what?" "Before I learned that music doesn't pay bills or save companies or keep people employed." His voice was matter-of-fact, but Sophia caught the hint of something deeper underneath. "My father used to say that art was for people who could afford to fail. That's horrible. That's realistic. The world doesn't owe anyone a living just because they can play Chopin." Sophia felt a spark of anger on behalf of the younger Ethan, who'd given up music for cold pragmatism. "Maybe not, but the world is a lot less beautiful without people who can play Chopin." Ethan looked up at her, something unreadable in his expression. "You really believe that?" "I believe that the things that make us human, art, music, creativity, emotion, those aren't luxuries. They're necessities. Without them, we're just very sophisticated machines. Very sophisticated machines that keep the economy running and people employed. Very sophisticated machines that work themselves to death in empty penthouses and never remember the last time they laughed. They stared at each other across the small table, the air between them charged with unspoken challenges and unexpected honesty. Sophia realized she was seeing glimpses of the person Ethan had been before. He'd armored himself in success and isolation. Rose appeared with plates of meatloaf, mashed potatoes, and green beans that looked like they'd been prepared by someone's grandmother. "Here you go, kids. Eat up." Ethan stared at his plate like he'd never seen comfort food before. "I usually eat sushi." "Of course you do. Raw fish is the perfect meal for someone who's forgotten how to feel things." Sophia took a bite of meatloaf and closed her eyes in appreciation. "This is real food. Food with soul. Food with approximately 3 times the recommended daily allowance of sodium. Food that Rose made with love, instead of a team of molecular gastronomists with too much time and not enough common sense." Despite himself, Ethan smiled, not the sharp, predatory smile he used in boardrooms, but something smaller and more genuine. "You have very strong opinions about food." "I have strong opinions about most things. It's one of my more charming qualities." Sophia grinned at him. "Try the meatloaf. I promise it won't kill you." Ethan took a tentative bite, chewed thoughtfully, and took another. "It's actually quite good." "Don't sound so surprised. Poor people have been making delicious food for centuries. We just never had the marketing budget to convince rich people it was worth eating." As they ate, Sophia found herself studying Ethan's face in the soft light of the diner. Without the harsh fluorescence of his office, he looked younger, less intimidating. She could almost imagine him as the boy who'd played piano before the world, taught him that art was a luxury he couldn't afford. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You're going to, regardless of my answer. Why did you really hire me? And don't give me that line about needing to learn competency. We both know you're the most competent person in any room." Ethan set down his fork, considering the question seriously. "You want the honest answer?" "Always. Because you looked at me and saw a person instead of a profit center." He met her eyes across the table. "Do you have any idea how rare that is?" The admission hit Sophia like a physical blow. She'd expected arrogance, maybe some twisted power play. She hadn't expected loneliness so profound it made her chest ache. "Ethan, most people want something from me. Money, connections, opportunities, revenge. You just wanted me to be better." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. It was refreshing. Being better isn't that complicated. You just have to care about something other than winning. Caring is dangerous. When you care about things, you can lose them. When you lose things you care about, it hurts. He pushed mashed potatoes around his plate. "I learned a long time ago that it's easier to not care. Easier, maybe, but not better." Sophia reached across the table without thinking, covering his hand with hers. "You can't protect yourself from loss by refusing to live." Ethan stared down at their joined hands, and Sophia felt that same electric jolt she'd experienced in his office. This time, she didn't pull away. "What if I've forgotten how?" he asked quietly. "Then you learn again. That's what people do. We mess up. We forget important things. And then we remember them again." She squeezed his hand gently. "I could teach you." "Teach me what?" "How to be human. How to laugh. How to care about things without being terrified of losing them." She smiled. "Think of it as advanced consulting." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing an absent pattern across her knuckles. The simple touch sent warmth spiraling through Sophia's entire body, and she realized with startling clarity that this was dangerous territory. She was supposed to be teaching him competency, not falling for him. But as she looked into those steel blue eyes and saw vulnerability instead of calculation, Sophia wondered if maybe falling was exactly what they both needed to learn how to do. 3 months, Ethan said finally. 3 months, she agreed. Neither of them moved to break the contact between their hands. And outside Sal's diner, Manhattan glittered with a million possibilities. Neither of them had dared to imagine before tonight. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Sophia had developed a routine. Coffee at 6:30 a.m. From the cart outside Pinnacle Tower, elevator to the 42nd floor by 6:50, and 5 minutes to mentally prepare for whatever corporate warfare Ethan had planned for the day. What she hadn't prepared for was finding him in the lobby at 6:45 a.m., looking like he'd slept in his clothes. "Ethan?" She approached cautiously, noting the wrinkled shirt, the stubble, the way his usually perfect hair stuck up at odd angles. "Are you okay?" He looked up at her with bloodshot eyes. "Define okay. Did you sleep here?" Sleep is for people who don't have the Alvarez group trying to orchestrate a hostile takeover of their entire company. He stood up stiffly, wincing as his back protested. Nathan brought me a change of clothes an hour ago. I just haven't had time to use them. Sophia felt a familiar stab of frustration. When's the last time you went home? Tuesday. Maybe Monday. The days blur together after a while. He started walking toward the elevator, and Sophia noticed the slight tremor in his hands. We have a board meeting in 30 minutes. The Alvarez Group has been buying up our stock through shell companies for weeks. They're making their move today. And you're going to fight them off running on what? 3 hours of sleep in the past 72 hours? I'm going to fight them off because that's what I do. The elevator doors opened, and Ethan stepped inside. I don't have the luxury of being tired. Sophia followed him, studying his profile as they ascended. She'd seen him intense before, but this was different. This was a man on the edge of collapse who refused to acknowledge it. Talk to me about Alvarez, she said. Who are they? What do they want? They're vultures, corporate raiders who buy struggling companies, strip them for parts, and sell off the pieces. Ethan's jaw tightened. They've been circling Carter Industries since the Lawson acquisition. Apparently, they think I'm overextended. Are you? He shot her a sharp look. I'm never overextended. That's not what I asked. The elevator doors opened on the 42nd floor, and Ethan strode toward his office without answering. Sophia hurried to keep up, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Ethan, talk to me. How bad is this? He stopped abruptly, turning to face her. For a moment, his mask slipped completely, and Sophia saw raw fear in his eyes. If they succeed, it's over. Everything I've built, everyone I employ gone. Alvarez doesn't preserve companies. Sophia, they destroy them. How many people work for Carter Industries directly? 8,000. If you count subsidiaries and partner companies, he ran a hand through his disheveled hair, maybe 20,000. 20,000 families. 20,000 people whose livelihoods depended on the man standing in front of her. Swaying slightly from exhaustion, Sophia felt the weight of that responsibility settle on her own shoulders. Okay, she said. What do you need me to do? Nothing. This isn't a PR problem. This is a fight for survival, and I fight alone. No, you don't. Sophia stepped closer, close enough to smell the coffee and stress radiating from him. Not anymore. You hired me to make you better at business, right? Well, part of good business is knowing when to accept help. Before Ethan could argue, Nathan appeared at his elbow, looking unusually frazzled. Sir, we have a problem. Alvarez just announced they're calling an emergency shareholder meeting for this afternoon. They're demanding a vote of no confidence. Sophia watched the color drain from Ethan's face. Can they do that? If they control enough shares, yes. Nathan consulted his tablet. Our latest count has them at approximately 35%. They need 51% for a majority. So, we need to make sure they don't get it, Sophia said. Both men looked at her like she'd announced her intention to fly to the moon. We? Ethan asked. Yes, we. You said I had 3 months to prove that business could be conducted with heart. Well, this is my chance. Sophia pulled out her phone. Nathan, I need a list of every major shareholder, every board member, every investor who has a significant stake in this company, and I need their personal information, not just business contacts, but everything. Where they live, what they care about, what keeps them up at night. Sophia, what are you thinking? Ethan's voice was cautious. I'm thinking that Alvarez is treating this like a hostile takeover, all aggression and intimidation. But what if we treated it like a campaign? What if, instead of fighting our shareholders, we reminded them why they invested in Carter Industries in the first place? Nathan was already typing furiously on his tablet. I can have that information to you within the hour. Make it 30 minutes. Sophia turned back to Ethan. And you shower, shave, put on a clean shirt. You look like you've been sleeping in a parking garage. I don't take orders from your consultant? Yes, you do. That's literally what you're paying me for. Sophia softened her tone. Ethan, you can't win this fight if you collapse from exhaustion before it even starts. Trust me. For a moment, she thought he might argue, then his shoulders sagged slightly, and he nodded. 30 minutes. Then, we meet in conference room A. As Ethan disappeared toward his private bathroom, Nathan lingered behind. Miss Bennett, may I say something? Of course. In 10 years of working for Mr. Carter, I've never seen him accept help from anyone. The fact that he's listening to you. Nathan paused, choosing his words carefully. It's significant. He's scared, Sophia said quietly, and scared people make bad decisions. I'm not going to let him destroy himself trying to save everyone else. There's something else you should know. Nathan glanced around to make sure they weren't being overheard. The reason Alvarez is targeting us now, after the Lawson acquisition, it's personal. Personal, how? Carlos Alvarez is Ethan's half-brother. Sophia felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. His what? Same father, different mothers. Carlos was born 6 months after Ethan, but his mother was… Well, let's say she wasn't the wife. When their father died, he left everything to Ethan. Carlos got nothing, and now he wants revenge. He wants what he believes is rightfully his, and he's willing to destroy Carter Industries to get it. Nathan's expression was grim. This isn't just about business, Miss Bennett. This is about family. Sophia sank into the nearest chair, her mind reeling. A hostile takeover was one thing she could strategize against corporate raiders. But a family feud? That was infinitely more complicated and dangerous. Does Ethan know you told me this? Mr. Carter doesn't discuss his family with anyone. But if you're going to help him fight this battle, you need to understand what you're really up against. 20 minutes later, Sophia was surrounded by files, financial reports, and background checks spread across the conference table like a battle plan. She'd called in favors from her old contacts at Lawson, reaching out to anyone who might have insight into Alvarez Group's operations. What she found wasn't encouraging. Carlos Alvarez was methodical, patient, and utterly ruthless. He'd spent the past 5 years systematically acquiring companies, stripping them of assets, and selling the remains to the highest bidder. His success rate was nearly 100%. But as Sophia dug deeper into the profiles of Carter Industries shareholders, she began to see patterns. These weren't just investment portfolios, they were people. Dr. Emily Liu had invested her retirement savings after Carter Industries funded the medical research facility where she worked. The Thompson Family Trust had bought shares because Ethan's company had saved their manufacturing business from bankruptcy 3 years ago. They're not just investors, Sophia murmured, making notes in the margins. They're people Ethan has helped. Talking to yourself is generally considered a sign of impending mental breakdown. Sophia looked up to find Ethan standing in the doorway, transformed. The shower and clean clothes had worked miracles. He looked like the powerful, confident businessman she'd first encountered in the lobby, but she could see the exhaustion still lingering around his eyes. Better, she said approvingly. Now you look like someone who could run a multi-billion-dollar corporation, instead of someone who was recently released from a psychiatric facility. Your pep talks need work. Ethan took the seat across from her, scanning the documents she'd spread across the table. What did you find? Your shareholders aren't just numbers on a balance sheet. They're people whose lives you've touched. Dr. Liu, the Thompson family, Maria Hernandez, who runs the small business initiative you funded. Sophia pulled out a dozen files. These people didn't invest in Carter Industries because they thought it would make them rich. They invested because they believe in what you're building. Believing in something doesn't always translate to loyalty when money is involved. Maybe not. But it's a place to start. Sophia stood up, pacing to the window that overlooked Manhattan. Alvarez is playing this like a traditional corporate raid, all intimidation and financial pressure. But what if we reminded these people that they're not just shareholders, they're partners in something meaningful? Ethan joined her at the window, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. You want to make this personal? I want to make this human. There's a difference. Sophia turned to face him and found herself trapped between his body and the window, suddenly very aware of how tall he was, how intently he was looking at her. Alvarez sees your company as a collection of assets to be liquidated. You see it as numbers on a spreadsheet that need to be protected. But what if we helped everyone remember that it's actually about people? And if we're wrong? If they choose Alvarez's money over whatever sentiment you think they feel toward me? Sophia could see her own reflection in his eyes, could count the individual lashes that framed them. Then we lose. But we lose fighting for something worth fighting for, instead of just fighting to win. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. You realize that if this doesn't work, your career goes down with mine. I know. Alvarez won't just destroy Carter Industries. He'll make sure that everyone associated with this company never works in corporate America again. I know, so why are you willing to risk everything for a company you've worked at for 3 weeks? Sophia felt heat creep up her neck as she realized the truth. She wasn't risking everything for Carter Industries. She was risking everything for the man standing in front of her, the man who worked himself to exhaustion to protect 20,000 families he'd never met. The man who'd given up music because someone had convinced him that beauty was a luxury he couldn't afford. Because someone needs to, she said quietly, and because you're not as heartless as you pretend to be. Before Ethan could respond, Nathan burst through the door. Sir, we have a problem. Alvarez just released a press statement. They're calling an emergency press conference in 2 hours. And they're announcing their intention to liquidate Carter Industries' non-profitable divisions immediately upon acquisition. Sophia felt Ethan go rigid beside her. Which divisions? All of them, sir. The medical research funding, the small business initiative, the educational grants, the environmental programs. Nathan's voice was grim. Everything that doesn't show immediate profit. Those programs employ thousands of people, Sophia said, horror creeping into her voice. Not anymore. They won't. Ethan moved away from the window, his mask of control slamming back into place. Alvarez is not just coming for my company. He's declaring war on everything I've tried to build. Sophia watched him pace the length of the conference room, his movements sharp and predatory. This was the Ethan Carter, the business world, feared cold, calculating, dangerous. But she could see the pain underneath the anger, the way his hands clenched into fists as he processed the magnitude of what they were facing. We fight back, she said. How? Alvarez has the media machine, the financial backing, the political connections. He has money and power. But we have something better. Sophia moved to the conference table, gathering up the shareholder files. We have truth, and we have people who remember what it feels like to be helped instead of exploited. Sophia, this isn't one of your advertising campaigns. This is real life, with real consequences. I know. That's why it's going to work. She faced him across the table, her chin raised in determination. Alvarez thinks this is about money, but it's not. It's about the difference between building something and destroying it. And I think, when it comes down to it, most people would rather be part of something that builds than something that destroys. Ethan stared at her for a long moment, and Sophia could practically see him weighing options, calculating odds, measuring risks. Finally, he nodded. What do you need? Access to everyone's shareholders, employees, board members, partners, everyone who has a stake in what happens to this company. And I need them all in one room by 4 o'clock. That's impossible. Some of these people are in different time zones, different countries. Then we bring them in virtually. Nathan, can you set up a video conference system that can handle 100 participants? Nathan was already pulling out his phone. I'll make it happen. And Ethan, Sophia caught his arm as he started to leave. I need you to do something that's going to be very difficult for you. What? I need you to tell them the truth. Not the corporate speak version, not the sanitized press release version. The real truth about what this company means to you, what these programs mean to the people they help, and what happens if Alvarez succeeds. Ethan's jaw tightened. I don't do emotional appeals. You do today. Because if we're going to save this company, we need people to remember why they wanted to be part of it in the first place. Sophia stepped closer, placing her hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat racing beneath her palm. And for that to work, they need to see your heart. For a moment, Ethan covered her hand with his eyes searching her face. What if I don't remember how? Then I'll remind you, Sophia said softly. That's what partners do. The word hung in the air between them. Partner, not consultant, not employee, but something deeper and more dangerous. Sophia saw recognition flicker in Ethan's eyes, saw the moment he realized that somewhere in the past 3 weeks, their professional arrangement had become something entirely different. 4 o'clock, he said finally. 4 o'clock, she agreed. As Sophia watched him leave the conference room, she realized that in trying to save Ethan's company, she might have just admitted something she wasn't ready to face. She was falling for him hard, fast, and completely against her better judgment. But as she looked at the files scattered across the table, all those lives depending on the outcome of this afternoon, she knew it didn't matter what she was feeling. What mattered was making sure that when the dust settled, Ethan Carter was still standing, and that the man who'd given up music for pragmatism didn't lose everything else he'd built in the process. The battle for Carter Industries was about to begin, and Sophia Bennett was going to make sure they won, even if it meant risking her heart in the process. At 3:47 p.m., Conference Room A had been transformed into something that looked like mission control for a space launch. Multiple screens displayed video feeds from around the world, while Sophia paced in front of a whiteboard covered in names, numbers, and what appeared to be a very complex battle plan. Her carefully styled hair had escaped its professional bun hours ago, and she'd long since abandoned her heels in favor of bare feet. Ethan stood at the head of the massive mahogany table, looking every inch the billionaire CEO, despite the exhaustion Sophia knew was eating at him from the inside. Around the table sat Carter Industries' board of directors, while the screens showed shareholders calling in from London, Tokyo, Sao Paulo, and a dozen other cities around the globe. Ladies and gentlemen, Ethan began, his voice carrying that familiar authority that could silence a room full of world leaders. "Thank you for joining us on such short notice. As you know, Alvarez Group has called for an emergency shareholder vote this afternoon. Before that vote takes place, I wanted you to hear directly from me about what's really at stake here." Sophia watched the faces on the screens, looking for any sign of how this was going to play out. "Doctor," Emily Liu looked worried. The Thompson family representative seemed confused. Maria Hernandez from the Small Business Initiative appeared to be taking notes. "The numbers are simple," Ethan continued. "Alvarez Group now controls approximately 35% of Carter Industries stock. They need 51% to gain control of the company. What they're not telling you is what happens if they succeed." He clicked a remote, and the main screen displayed a detailed breakdown of Alvarez Group's business model. Sophia had helped him prepare this presentation, but watching him deliver it, she was struck again by how commanding he was when he let his guard down just enough to show he actually cared. "Alvarez Group specializes in what they call asset optimization," Ethan said, his voice taking on a harder edge. "What that means in practice is that they buy companies, fire as many employees as possible, sell off anything that doesn't generate immediate profit, and liquidate the rest. In the past 5 years, they've acquired 17 companies. Those companies previously employed a combined total of 43,000 people. Today, fewer than 8,000 of those jobs still exist." A murmur went through the room and across the video connections. Sophia saw several shareholders exchanging glances. "If Alvarez Group gains control of Carter Industries," Ethan continued, "they have already announced their intention to immediately terminate what they call non-profitable divisions. That includes our medical research funding program, which currently supports breakthrough cancer research at 15 hospitals. It includes our small business initiative, which has helped over 200 companies get started in underserved communities. It includes our educational grant program, which has sent over 5,000 students to college who couldn't otherwise afford it." "Doctor," Liu leaned forward on her screen. "Ethan, is this confirmed?" "They would really eliminate the medical research funding. It's not just confirmed, Emily. It's their stated strategy." Carlos Alvarez gave an interview to the Wall Street Journal this morning, where he called our humanitarian programs feel-good waste that shareholders shouldn't have to subsidize. Sophia watched the ripple of shock and anger that went through the virtual room. This was exactly what she'd hoped for. These people weren't just investors, they were partners in something meaningful. "But here's what Alvarez Group doesn't understand," Ethan said, and Sophia heard something new in his voice, something warmer, more personal. "They see these programs as expenses to be cut. I see them as investments in the future." "Doctor," Liu's research program has produced 3 patents that generated over $50 million in licensing fees last year. Our small business initiative has created partnerships that brought in $200 million in new contracts. Our educational grants have produced engineers, doctors, and entrepreneurs who are now contributing to our economy in ways that can't be measured on a quarterly report." Maria Hernandez spoke up from her screen in Chicago. "Ethan, what are you asking us to do?" Before Ethan could answer, Sophia stepped forward. She'd been planning this moment for hours, but now that it was here, her heart was hammering against her ribs. "He's asking you to remember why you invested in Carter Industries in the first place," she said, looking directly into the cameras that would carry her words around the world. "And I'm asking you to let me tell you a story." Ethan shot her a questioning look, but Sophia forged ahead. This wasn't part of their planned presentation, but sometimes the most important things couldn't be scripted. 3 months ago, I was unemployed, blacklisted, and about $30 away from having to move back in with my parents. I just lost my job because of a corporate acquisition that went wrong. An acquisition that Ethan Carter had orchestrated. I was angry, humiliated, and I blamed him for ruining my life. She could see confusion on the faces around the table and on the screens. This definitely wasn't what anyone had expected to hear. So, when I ran into him in the lobby of this building, I did something incredibly stupid. I called him incompetent. In front of 50 people, I told him he was heartless, that he cared more about profit margins than human lives. Sophia glanced at Ethan, who was watching her with an unreadable expression. "And you know what he did? He could have had me arrested for harassment. He could have sued me for defamation. He could have used his considerable power to make sure I never worked again." She turned back to the cameras. "Instead, he hired me. He gave me a chance to prove that business could be conducted with heart instead of just calculation. He let me challenge him, argue with him, and force him to see his company through different eyes." "Doctor," Liu was leaning forward on her screen now, clearly intrigued. "And what did you find?" I found a man who works 18-hour days because he knows 20,000 families depend on the decisions he makes. I found someone who personally reviews every application for our educational grants because he wants to make sure the money goes to kids who will use it to build something better. I found a CEO who could make an extra $100 million a year if he cut our humanitarian programs, but refuses to do it because he knows those programs save lives. Sophia's voice grew stronger as she continued. Carlos Alvarez looks at Carter Industries and sees assets to be stripped and sold. But that's not what this company is. This company is Dr. Lou's Cancer Research. It's the Thompson family's manufacturing business, staying afloat during the recession. It's Maria's initiative that helped 200 entrepreneurs follow their dreams. She walked to the whiteboard where she'd mapped out every shareholder, every connection, every life that Carter Industries had touched. Alvarez Group wants you to vote based on fear that you'll lose money, fear that you'll miss out on short-term profits. But I'm asking you to vote based on hope that we can build something that lasts, hope that business can be a force for good in the world, hope that when we're all gone, we'll have left something behind that made the world a little bit better. The room was completely silent now. Everyone focused on Sophia as she made her plea. Ethan Carter isn't perfect. He's stubborn, he's arrogant, and he has a tendency to think he can solve every problem by working harder instead of working smarter. But he's also the kind of leader who will fight for what's right, even when it's not profitable. He's the kind of man who will sacrifice his own comfort to protect people he's never met. And he's the kind of CEO who deserves partners who believe in something more than just money. Sophia turned to Ethan, who was staring at her with an expression of wonder and something that looked dangerously close to love. That's the man I've come to know over the past 3 months. That's the leader I'm asking you to support, not because it's the safe choice or the profitable choice, but because it's the right choice. She stepped back, her heart hammering, and Ethan moved to stand beside her. For a moment, she thought he might take over the presentation, return to the safety of numbers and projections. Instead, he did something that shocked everyone in the room. He smiled, not his usual sharp-edged business smile, but something genuine and warm and entirely human. "Sophia is right about one thing," he said, his voice carrying a tone none of them had heard before. "I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. I've prioritized profits over people, and I've convinced myself that caring was a luxury I couldn't afford." He looked directly into the cameras, and Sophia could see him making a choice to be vulnerable in front of the most powerful people in his professional world. But 3 months ago, a very brave woman stood in this building's lobby and called me incompetent. She was right not because I didn't know how to run a business, but because I'd forgotten why I wanted to run one in the first place. Ethan moved to the window that overlooked Manhattan, and Sophia could see him gathering his thoughts. "My father built Carter Industries from nothing. He started with a single construction contract and a dream of creating something that would last, but somewhere along the way, he lost sight of that dream. He became so focused on winning that he forgot what he was trying to win for." Sophia realized that this was the first time she'd ever heard Ethan talk about his family with anything other than cold professionalism. "When my father died, he left me a company and a half-brother who felt cheated out of his inheritance. Carlos has spent the past 15 years trying to prove that he deserved what I inherited. And maybe he's right. Maybe he would have been a better choice to run Carter Industries." Several people started to protest, but Ethan held up a hand. "But Carlos sees this company as a legacy to be claimed. I've learned to see it as a responsibility to be honored. Every person we employ, every program we fund, every partnership we build, those aren't just line items on a balance sheet. They're promises we've made to be better than we were yesterday." He turned back to face the room and the cameras. "Alvarez Group is offering you money. I'm offering you purpose. They're promising short-term profits. I'm promising long-term impact. They want to liquidate what we've built. I want to build something even better." Ethan walked back to the table, placing his hands flat on the mahogany surface as he looked at each board member in turn. "In 15 minutes, you're going to vote on the future of Carter Industries. You can choose Alvarez's money, or you can choose to be part of something that matters. But whatever you choose, I want you to know that working with all of you has been the greatest privilege of my professional life." He straightened up, and Sophia could see him bracing for whatever came next. Dr. Lou was the first to speak. "I have a question for both of you. Sophia, you said that 3 months ago, you hated Ethan for destroying your career at Lawson. Now you're risking everything to save his company. What changed?" Sophia felt every eye in the room focus on her and realized this was the moment of truth. She could give a professional answer about business ethics and corporate responsibility, or she could tell the truth. "I fell in love with him," she said simply. The admission sent a shockwave through the room that Sophia could practically feel. Ethan went completely still beside her, and she realized she'd just made the biggest gamble of her life. Not just romantically, though. Yes, that too. I fell in love with the man who works himself to exhaustion to protect people he's never met. I fell in love with the leader who could make millions by cutting humanitarian programs, but refuses to do it because it's wrong. I fell in love with someone who gave up playing piano because he thought art was a luxury, but who builds beauty into everything he creates anyway. Sophia turned to face Ethan, no longer caring who was watching or what it might cost her professionally. I fell in love with the man who taught me that competence isn't about being perfect, it's about caring enough to keep trying to be better. The silence that followed felt like it lasted for hours. Then Maria Hernandez spoke up from Chicago. Well, that settles it for me. Any man who can inspire that kind of loyalty deserves mine. 2. Dr. Liu nodded on her screen. I've been working with Ethan for 5 years. I've seen him make hard decisions, but I've never seen him make a cruel one. Alvarez Group can't say the same. One by one, the shareholders began to speak: the Thompson family, the Wilson Trust, the retirement fund managers who'd invested because they believed in Carter Industries' mission. Sophia watched Ethan's face as person after person chose to stand with him and saw something she'd never seen before. He was fighting back tears. By the time the vote was taken, Alvarez Group's bid for control had been decisively defeated. The final tally showed them with only 38% support, not nearly enough to gain control of the company. As the video calls ended and board members began filing out of the conference room, Sophia found herself alone with Ethan for the first time since her very public declaration of love. He was standing at the window again, looking out at the city he'd just fought to protect. So, she said, trying to keep her voice light, that was either the best or worst career move I've ever made. Ethan turned to face her, and Sophia was startled to see that his eyes were bright with unshed tears. Sophia, he said, but she cut him off. It's okay, she said quickly. I know this is complicated. I know you don't do relationships, and I know mixing business with personal feelings is probably against every rule in your corporate handbook. I couldn't let you fight this battle thinking you were alone. Instead of responding, Ethan crossed the room in 3 quick strides and cupped her face in his hands. You magnificent, impossible woman, he said softly. Do you have any idea what you just did? Probably destroyed my career and made things incredibly awkward between us. Ethan laughed, the first genuine laugh Sophia had ever heard from him. You saved my company. You saved 20,000 jobs. You reminded me why I wanted to build something in the first place. His thumbs traced along her cheekbones, and Sophia felt her breath catch. And you made me realize that I've been an idiot for the past 3 months. Only 3 months? Well, probably longer than that. But specifically, I've been an idiot about you. Ethan's voice grew serious. I hired you because you weren't afraid of me. I kept you around because you challenged me. But I fell in love with you because you saw something in me that I'd forgotten existed. Sophia's heart stopped. You what? I fell in love with you, Sophia Bennett. Somewhere between that first day in the lobby and watching you convince 100 powerful people to believe in something bigger than money, I fell completely, irrevocably in love with you. Before Sophia could respond, Ethan's mouth was on hers, and she discovered that kissing a billionaire was surprisingly similar to kissing anyone else, except for the part where her knees went weak. Her brain short-circuited, and she forgot her own name. When they finally broke apart, Sophia realized they were both breathing hard. So, she said, trying to regain her equilibrium, does this mean I'm still employed? That depends. Are you still interested in teaching an arrogant billionaire how to be human? Sophia smiled, reaching up to straighten his tie. I think you're making pretty good progress on your own. But yeah, I'm interested, as long as the benefits package includes regular trips to Sal's diner, the occasional reminder that you're allowed to take breaks, and the occasional piano recital. Sophia's eyebrows shot up. You're going to start playing again? Someone very wise recently told me that art isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. And I have a lot of years to make up for. Ethan smiled, and Sophia realized it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. Besides, I need to serenade the woman who saved my company. Our company, Sophia corrected. Nathan told me you're making me a partner, not just a consultant. Nathan has a big mouth. Nathan has excellent judgment, just like his boss when he remembers to listen to his heart instead of just his calculator. Ethan spun her around the empty conference room, both of them laughing like teenagers. When he set her down, Sophia realized that somewhere in the past 3 months, she'd found exactly what she didn't know she was looking for. So, what happens now? She asked. Now, we go home to my empty penthouse, order Chinese takeout, and you teach me how to play piano again. Ethan kissed her forehead gently. And tomorrow, we start building something even better than what we saved today. Sophia looked out at Manhattan spread below them, all those lights representing all those lives they'd fought to protect, and realized that sometimes the best things in life came from the most unexpected places, like falling in love with the man you once called incompetent in front of 50 witnesses. "I love you too, by the way," she said, in case that wasn't clear from my earlier public humiliation. "It was clear," Ethan said, pulling her close, "but I like hearing it anyway." As they left Pinnacle Tower together that evening, Sophia's phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Saw the news coverage of the Alvarez thing. Please tell me you didn't actually fall in love with the billionaire." Sophia looked at Ethan, who was trying to hail a cab while simultaneously checking his phone, and somehow still managing to look impossibly handsome. "Okay, I won't tell you that," she typed back. "Sophia Rose Bennett, you are either the luckiest woman alive or completely insane." Sophia smiled as Ethan successfully flagged down a taxi and held the door open for her with an exaggerated bow. "Probably both," she replied, "but I'm happy." And as their taxi pulled into Manhattan traffic, heading toward a penthouse where a billionaire was going to remember how to play piano while a former advertising executive taught him that the most important things in life couldn't be measured on a balance sheet, Sophia realized that sometimes incompetence was exactly what the world needed. Sometimes the best way to run a company was to remember that it was made up of people, and sometimes the most successful partnerships began with someone brave enough to call a powerful man incompetent in front of 50 witnesses. 3 months later, Carter Industries announced record profits, the expansion of all humanitarian programs, and the engagement of CEO Ethan Carter to newly appointed Chief Creative Officer Sophia Bennett. The wedding was held at Sal's Diner in Queens, where Rose made the cake, and the guest list included billionaires, board members, and a taxi driver who'd become friends with the happy couple during their regular late-night visits. And if the groom's piano performance during the reception made everyone cry, well, that was just proof that art really was a necessity, not a luxury. Some love stories begin with love at first sight. Others begin with someone brave enough to tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Sophia and Ethan's story began with incompetence, bloomed through partnership, and grew into the kind of love that changes not just two people, but everyone around them, and they lived, not necessarily happily ever after, because real life is messier than fairy tales, but consciously, purposefully, and with the kind of fierce joy that comes from finding someone who makes you want to be the best version of yourself, even if that someone once made you so angry you called them incompetent in front of half of Wall Street. Especially then. The end.